What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. This is weird to say because James is one of us, but James is our guest today, along with Brandon, who will be joining him shortly from the DFBA. James, what is your title again? Because I forgot already.
Executive director.
Executive Director. So,
Flashy.
um, slash what?
I said super flashy.
Oh, flashy. Yeah. Yeah, he had to find the longest title and just run with it.
Yeah.
But you guys are looking to shake things up a little bit, and you guys have obviously done some rounds on some podcasts, but I'm sure at least a good portion of our audience has potentially not seen those podcasts and has seen the DFBA posted up on our page and your page, and numerous other people have shared it around and stuff, and are like, yo, what's the DFBA? What's up with this? Is it a new organization? Is it a new federation? Is it a show? What's going on? So we're going to do our best to at least very concisely sum up for you guys what that is, and obviously talk about some unfoldings probably since some of those podcasts have gone down if you have seen some of the other podcasts. So James, short and sweet, what is the DFBA?
Yeah, so the best example that people are going to understand would be like if you look at the Olympics, right? It's a collective of countries. In our sport, it's federations that are coming together into one like end of year games, if you will, big show. All different federations coming together for that. But if you know the Olympics, you know that there's also a very large ruling body and code of conduct and bylaws and legislation that they're founded on, right? So to gain access to the Olympics, you have to abide by set rules, you have to abide by set standards, you have to agree to the drug testing, and that's what differentiates the DFBA from other projects that are trying to do the similar thing with a big collective year-end event. We created it almost like in reverse, right? Yes, we have the year-end event. We're gonna have this big show. We're gonna blow it up. It's gonna be awesome. Super excited about it. Ryan is doing a lot of work in the background right now to make that show like very exceptional, and it'll just grow the more global representatives we get. But it started from our code of conduct and our bylaws, which established these rules and regulations, trying to standardize judging, standardize scoring, standardize even the divisions across the sport, lots of different things like that, as well as the testing side of things and the rights and liberties of the athlete, right? Trying to do away with some of these more archaic and restrictive regulations that some federations have had historically.
Yep, yep. So you're trying to give more power to the athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. We want the athlete to be able to compete wherever they want to compete without fear of bias. And that's where the transparency of judging comes into play. A long-term project we're working on would be like releasing digital scorecards onto our website so everyone knows like this is where you score, this is where you place. Like you can read into it as much as you want to or not. Because right now we know that doesn't happen, right? It's this
Yeah,
is what the judges say and that's what it is. And then there's actually no database to even look back and say, well, who was second place in the show? Who was third place? It's super scattered. So
yeah.
there's a lot of different projects we want to do for this first year. It's coming together, bringing executives and federations together under kind of one umbrella that abide by these rules, and then putting them into one show and seeing who's the best of the best.
Yeah. The judging, I think, is probably one of the coolest parts because, I think we've all probably been at shows, and this is usually how it goes, where it's like you try to find a judge right after the show to talk to them. Because even in the athletes meeting beforehand, they're like, if you want judges' feedback, try to find them right away because after that, you're just an email coming through with a, hey, I was number blah, blah, blah. Do you have feedback? And we know that feedback's usually like a quick couple blurbs, like, oh, bigger biceps, bigger this, bigger that. But if you can get some transparency as to like, okay, yes, physique wise, this is what I need to improve on, but like, why did I place here against so and so? You know, maybe I don't know if you guys would have transparency to like everybody's score and why, or if it was just like your own personal login and you could see your placings and your scoring. But if you could see that first place got a 10 out of 10 in muscularity and you got an 8 out of 10 and ABCY, then you have a bit more tangible feedback, or like your conditioning was a 10 out of 10, theirs was an 8 out of 10. So you're like, okay, I was conditioned, but I was just too small, or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
Because
And I
our
think that's a
our sport
completely
is go ahead.
it's a realistic thing to do, right? Like to say like, hey, you won the symmetry round, but you lost in conditioning muscularity, whatever it is. Like that feedback in itself, as simple as that is something that athletes don't have unless it's just word of mouth from a judge. And honestly, you might get, you know, different feedback from every single judge because you're not looking at like the master scorecard. You're going to each judge and saying like, all right, what did you think? All right, what did you
Yeah.
think? Right. So to see like a summary of the scores, it's going to tell you all you really need to know.
Cool. Cool. Okay, let's talk the the system of the DFBA. So you mentioned our equivalent to the Olympics having their countries as we have our federations, which we know within natural bodybuilding, globally, domestically for sure, globally, there is no shortage of different, let's call it places you can go.
Mhm.
You're trying to consolidate that and say, okay, you guys can all remain autonomous. You guys are all your own thing. We're not coming in here and sweeping you guys under the rug under this banner. But you're saying, okay, we want to streamline a system where everybody agrees on, like you said, right? Like judging and all that kind of stuff and systems in place, code of conduct, fairness for the athletes, drug testing. So ABCD organization has their own shows that you guys give the green check to, right? They get the gold sticker.
Yep.
That then can feed to you
Yep.
to one show, or is there, or how does
So
that look?
especially for this first year, it's one show. It's one show that's actually being co-branded. So that one show, which I don't know if we've even made a huge announcement about, the year-end show for the 2025 season will be the ANBF Monster Mash, which we know what was the WNBF Monster Mash with Nancy Andrews. So she
Mhm.
sold that to Ryan with ANBF. He's now co-branding that. So that'll be a 2-day event. It'll be the ANBF like amateur portion of things on one day, and then it'll be the what and also international. So we can dive into that a little bit more. But then the pro portion with the DFBA will be that second day. So that will be our year-end event for 25, with the goal of in 26 making it a completely separate entity, branded under a different name, and that's now like the year-end, Super Bowl, if you will. So one show. And like you said, each federation can propose anywhere from 1 to 3 of their kind of like top tier shows to the board. Board takes a look at them based on some criteria, seeing like how many athletes are in it, the quality of the show. And then, like you said, they give that green check mark and say, like, yes, this is now a DFBA Premier qualifier. Any individuals that compete in that show and place top five gain acceptance into like a pool for applications to the year-end show. And then from that pool, the board will vote on the best X number of athletes that will gain an invite to the year end show. So just by competing and placing top five, you don't get onto the year end stage. You get the opportunity to be chosen pretty much. So we're trying to do it kind of like Arnold-esque, where it's invite only, just because you guys have seen it, right? At the more layers of like hierarchy and qualification that you have, the better the competition is going to be. And if we really want to see who's the best of best, there has to be some sort of filter to kind of filter out some of the athletes that just don't quite make the cut. And then that hopefully incentivizes them to just keep improving. Good morning,
Right.
Brandon.
So with the
Yeah.
qualification, hey Brandon, with the
Hey,
qualification system, do you intend to have winners automatically qualify and then invites from there, or how do you plan on structuring that?
The beauty of this answer, and this is the answer that I get to say a lot this year, is we're still figuring out some of these things, right? Like I don't have all the
yeah.
answers just yet, nor should I, me specifically, because the board of directors has to vote on quite a few of these things. So as of right now, as it's written, it's top five, with no differentiator between if you're, second, third, or first. I think
Okay.
there could be an argument made. So if someone posed that to the board saying like, hey, like winners of each show should gain an automatic berth, and I think that's a pretty valid option. That's something that we would just, hey, board vote on it. If it's selected, cool, we write that into the bylaws. So it's all very organic and it's a living document.
Sure. And
Gotcha.
what's the name of that year-end show then? Is it going to be a Monster Match this year, or
For
have you
this year,
released it? Or
it's the Monster Mash. Next year, it'll be something different, and that's something we're still brainstorming because we have some creative minds that want to make something very special out of that. I can
When
guarantee you it will not be named the Worlds because there are about 18 world competitions so far.
when so so you get to the finals
Mhm.
and you win. So you guys, because you're not an organization, there's not like DFBA pros, correct? You're
Correct.
just winning a show and ideally winning a bunch of money and winning a show that has a representation of multiple federations versus just this small funnel of this organization. You guys are trying to say, okay, instead of like this narrow scope, we're going this scope to find this person.
Yep. Yep. And that's twofold too. As an athlete, you can say like, I am the best men's bodybuilder of all these federations for the year, right?
Yeah,
And then you have the right to say that versus some federations, like if you're only competing within your own federation, there's just athletes that don't compete outside of federations. On the federation side, now you can say, we have the best men's bodybuilders in our federation, right? And there will be a point system kind of with that as well, where it's not just like one athlete. Like you have bragging rights as a federation saying like, hey, we brought a team, our team crushed it. Look at where we placed. And then hopefully that's our way of supporting the federations where now people see that they are putting their name on a big stage and now they gain a little bit more recognition globally.
very cool. Very cool. I like it. So Monster Mash this year is the big one. Next year you're gonna go big with like its own entity. I feel like I heard you mention that show would travel. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Brandon,
Yeah,
looks
so
like you
like
had something to say there. Yeah.
yeah, that's the main thing from a marketing standpoint where we're not, and this is us now talking to the federation heads and people who are looking, because a lot of people have asked us in the comments section, a lot of us have got messages in terms of, sure, you guys say that you're drawing these best athletes, but what incentive does the actual federations have to participate in this other than these bragging rights? And realistically, it's very simple. We have people now who are competing with federations here within the United States and in through Canada that took a look that we signed up with the NBA that have gone to some of their shows online and been like, hey, I wonder what the competitor pool looks like. And what we're doing is as an almost like an advertising bump. If someone says, hey, I heard this federation is coming up from, Hungary. I heard this federation's coming from Spain. I wonder what the competitiveness of and the nature of their athletes looks like before you actually get to this year-end show. People will travel to compete against the best if they think it's going to give them a leg up in trying to win a major title show. So as we've been talking to some of these federation heads, that's one of the marketing tools that we're using to try to show people, look, this isn't even just for the athletes. This is for the sport. This grows this idea of where are the best athletes? What's the best shows? How do I become the best natural bodybuilder? And, furthermore, if I wanted to really make this a career, which, you look behind me in the camera here, it's one of those things that I've always loved about natural bodybuilding is that I went to 17 different countries to compete against their best. And then when they come to the Natural Olympia with the INBA, PNBA, where I was competing at, they were trying to take a crown from me. And if it wasn't, sort of inter-federation in the exact same federation, that would be a huge draw. Where if let's say an Italian federation wanted to dethrone me because I went on their turf and took their title back home for me, it's the same thing, except now it's on a grander scale. The reason why I don't love the Super Bowl aspect of how we describe this show is because it's more like the Olympics. You're going to all of these different flags as opposed to these, different shows under the same divisional federation head and saying, I want to beat the best athletes in the world. So a lot of these other federations were like, hey, taking a look at our membership and taking a look at the registration for the shows that we've had the last couple of years, that's a great draw for having people travel outside of not just their own state here in the United States, but their own countries to try to seek out the best competition around the world.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and then definitely one of the benefits and perks is like you were hinting at, Leroy, that year-end show will travel amongst the federations. So early on this year, that pool will be smaller. So if you get in now, you have a higher chance of being selected to be the next host nation, if you will, host federation. But yeah, that's certainly the intention because we've seen it, right? Like how many world's level shows are hosted in the US, right? Like that's cool for us US North American based athletes, but for everyone else that always has to travel, it's kind of a bummer. It's an expense and it might be a limiting factor for the sport to see some of the best athletes on that stage. Where if you constantly rotate it, now you're seeing a different pool maybe each year just because the finances are a little bit easier to travel. And as a US based athlete, I think it would be cool to travel to go compete, which is not something that I have done, right? So then it incentivizes you to like, all right, like I'll do my circuit here, I'll qualify, but now I get to go to, wherever, NBA in Australia, that's one of our federations that we've announced, right? So they have shows in Bali, they have shows in China, they have shows in Australia, right? So if we select them as a host, like how many people want to go to Bali for a vacation anyway? Cool. Now you get to go compete and then maybe stay there and hang out for a little bit. Like that sounds like an awesome perk to me.
Is
So
there a
your member
pro and
organization will be hosting that year event every year then
Yeah. So
from
it would
us.
be it would be the same title, but it would be, you would have to have a host federation to kind of like run everything through pretty much. People on the ground there to organize things.
Gotcha.
is
And
there
then
is there pro and amateur or no?
Yeah. So this is something that we've actually just recently ironed out. The amateur portion, again, like you said, we're not an organization. We don't hand out DFBA pro cards, but the agreement would be you send your amateurs to any one of these shows. They win. They should receive their host federation's pro card, right? So
Gotcha.
like NBA comes over to the year-end event, the Monster Mash this year, they're going to bring a team. Say one of their guys wins it, cool. There's no reason for them to get an A and BF pro card. They're probably not going to compete there again. But now they've gained an NBA pro card, and then they've qualified to compete on DFBA stages.
And for anybody listening, because a lot of times when we put forth a message like that, we usually get pushback again, where it's like, well, so you just expect the federations to trust your judging panel, or you just expect the federation to judge, the size and the quality of the show. Like, yes, that's what we do. We are proving to these partner federations that this is the quality that we're going to bring, not just to the shows but to our judges panel. And that was an extensive discussion that we had over the last couple of federation meetings, where they wanted to know what we're doing to sort of ensure not just fair judging, but better judging that's been done in the past with these same qualifications. As much as we would like to say that we're trying to do something that's never been done before, this same pro card status said existed to an extent, with sort of a letter from the Mr. America when you would compete there as an amateur and trying to go pro there. And at the same time, it works that way at the Arnold, where the IFBB sanctions a show that basically their coat of arms is nowhere around, but their judges are sanctioned by the IFBB, and if you go pro at the Arnold, you have an IFBB pro card. So, this is an innovative section of how to do that, but it's not necessarily the most, how are you going to convince people to do that? It's already been done in the past. What we're doing is just doing it for our message and for a better pool of athletes that want to do something different in the sport.
Mhm. And the big thing to point out there too is when Brandon and I are saying our, we're speaking on behalf of the board of directors, right? Like, and this is something like I've seen messages already, I've seen criticisms already where it's like, oh, so and so is just trying to take over. It's a power trip. It's, they're trying to make money, whatever. I actually don't have a vote on the board of directors the way I've written the documents. So I'm literally just a spokesperson for this project. The board of directors is comprised of our executive officers and the federation executives. So quite literally, the people that are getting involved with this, it's not like you are, you know, coming under our rules and just like listening to what I have to say. You are making the rules as one of the board of directors, right? You have a seat at the table to vote on all issues and matters and actually have more power than myself, the one that recruited you, right? So it's in my mind, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, I'm highly biased, but right, like if you want to say in the sport, wouldn't you want to be a part of a project that is working to revolutionize the sport?
I like it. I like it. So who's all involved that you can talk about right now? Like you know, where globally do we have some stamps now? So we obviously have the ANBF, so US.
Yep. Yeah. So
You mentioned
yeah,
Australia.
Yep. So China, Bali, Australia, US, as of right now, that can be announced. There are three other countries that will likely be announced in the next coming weeks. And there is another US based federation that we've been in talk, well, another two federations we've been in talk with in the US that we would like to bring on board and likely will, so long as the conversation continues the way it is.
Very
So if
cool.
an organization wants to join you guys, how do they do that and what can they expect? They have to obviously agree to your bylaws, but um, you know, you know, what's that process look like?
I mean, right now it's not that difficult. What we basically have written out over the last, 8 weeks, which Dr. Johnson was very, integral in writing that stuff and making sure that the most amount of input from all of these other figureheads that would want to be involved with us at least gave us what they would consider to be a viable option in terms of what we would call our code of ethics and our code of conduct. We're sort of trying to streamline and come together to certify people's drug testing standards, in terms of, we want to be clear in the sense that like we're not the World Anti-Doping Agency. What we're trying to do is make sure that everybody's following the same rules. So essentially, what we're doing is just looking at how people are running business as usual, how they are have in the past and plan to revolutionize how they catch cheaters, how they certify their judges panels, and we take a look at what honestly we've done this in the past. I mean this. We've talked to a couple people that seem to want to get involved with us for the wrong reasons. And we come together as the board of directors and say, listen, I don't really know that this person's motivation is in the right spot. They see us kind of growing really fast, and I don't really think that they want to join us because they want the message and they want to share with us in terms of their athletes and grow the sport. I think that they see that we're doing something great and they may be joining up with us because they have an ulterior motive of wanting more control and trying to merge competitors from other federations. So realistically, it's an interview process the same way we talked about the first time this was incepted, where we want to talk to these federation heads and see if they're in it for the right reasons and make sure that their ethics and morality in terms of how they run their shows, treat their athletes, expect certain qualifications and, the amount of shows that they require of their amateurs and pros to compete in per year, and just make sure that our messages mesh up. And then that their drug testing standards are up to snuff in terms of being in industry standard. And then outside of that, it's just whether or not they move in the same direction as us if they want a seat at the table for the board of directors. And even then, just like James had said, it's still not even just up to the two of us. It's still up to everybody else to go, look, we've heard what you had to say. And even if me and James go, listen, I think this person's a little earlier. I think that their head's in the wrong spot. Other people might be like, no, I think you guys are reading into that. That's the whole point of this athlete collective and having this sort of check and balance oversight is that we want to do what's good for the sport. And the sport is not one voice. It's not two voices. It's not three people. It's an entire representation of people at a table who all get a say in terms of what they think is the best quality action moving forward. But other than that, I mean, it's very simple to just reach out to us, and we're pretty personable, right? And just say, hey, listen, I think this is a message I want to get involved in. I think this is a direction that the sport needs to go in. And we've basically just been scheduling calls with people, and we're going to continue to do that, whether it be this year, 2026, 2027, 2030. Just approach us. Tell us where you're coming from. Tell us what your standards are in terms of how you run your federation, and come be involved in the tip of the spear in terms of what the next phase of natural bodybuilding and the next phase of really this sport specific message is going to be moving forward in through the next couple decades.
Gotcha. So is it the board of directors that votes on whether new organization is admitted then?
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're going to reach out to the people that they know and name drop first in terms of like us being in front of the camera. But
Gotcha.
yeah, we don't have final say. It goes to the board of directors.
Gotcha. And then once they're admitted, are they automatically uh, added as a board member then?
I'll pitch that one to James. He's a little bit
Yeah.
more well versed in terms of how that works.
Yeah, so for this first year, yes, just because we need to grow that board.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
After this first year, the number of seats will be capped just for the year because again, like you got to be efficient with the people you're working with. Like, yes, would I
Yep.
love to have like 15 people all sitting together because that means we have representatives from all over the world. Yes. But also then you're going to have more bickering and infighting and things like that. So for this first year, when we're trying to figure things out, we need people that share very similar ideas and methodology to us. So it's a little bit more streamlined. So we'll be capping that on a slightly smaller scale this year. From there, then it just goes to the board vote to say like, hey, do we want to add another seat? Yes or no? If they say yes, then we look back at like who else is affiliated with us, propose, they pitch themselves and also not to overlook that like that board also will hold some spots designated specifically for athlete representatives. So not someone who is necessarily affiliated with a federation on the executive status, but like a coach, high level athlete, someone that can
Okay.
really speak for the athletes, male and female.
And how
What's
would they
the
be designated? Go ahead, Leroy.
I was just quickly going to ask what's the drug-free timeline because that varies.
Right now, 7 years is what we're kind of saying, because that's kind of like the middle ground for a lot of the federations. It's significantly more than the ones that are on the lower side, a little bit less than some of the more restrictive federations. And let's be real, like the difference between 7 years and 10 years, it's not that much. If you're, not taking anything for 7, I imagine you're probably not going to take anything for 10. But also, and Brandon knows this a lot more detail with me, so I'll let him clarify this. And that also comes down to like the ability to actually accurately test for
Right.
substances.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a realist in all of this, and we get this question a lot, no matter which federation I've gone to, no matter which show I go to. It's nice for a federation to put their drug testing timelines up where they say, if you've ever done drugs, we don't want you on this stage, right? You have a slippery slope there in terms of what the drug testing standards actually are, right? We see people all the time in social media condemn others in the comment section without any real proof that, yes, okay, I mean, the fat-free mass index, and you take a look at how much muscle this person put on in a short period of time. But realistically, if you take a look at what WADA tests and what IOC standard tests can do, and you take a look at what's called the picogram level, which would be like I took a grain of salt and I cut it into a million pieces, right? WADA tests can track these long-term metabolites to the picogram level. I hate to use this as an example, but that's what kept catching John Jones all those years ago was that he kept having what's called pulse readings, where it would come up clean, and then the next time they would test him, he would have a couple picograms in his blood because what's happening is it's basically irradiating back out because it's fat soluble as he's cutting down for these shows, and turinabol kept showing up, let's say, right? What it's really capable of doing is catching these long-term metabolites, but even then it could be a little squirrely in terms of what you're looking for at year 5, year 7, right? Depending on how much body fat the person had at that given time, depending on how often you're testing them, whether it be on season or off season. So we're under no, qualms about telling people that drug testing has gotten much, much better over the last 5, 10 years. It's going to continue to get better, and we're literally interviewing people from these different, testing standards where it's not just blood, it's not just urine, it's not just polygraph, which, I'm lukewarm on. It's other methodologies that are coming together to try to give us the greatest percentage of catching people, no matter what their chosen way to try to beat the test is. And this is all just me saying, listen, we've had faith in these drug tests before as athletes, right? And it's usually the first straw that people pull. But realistically, in terms of how accurate they can, I'm talking these little tiny picograms are insanely accurate on these tests. So if you're using actual IOC Olympic testing, which this has become a problem in the industries when people say they are, and then we hear the promoters basically saying, I was told to either get rid of the urine or, I sent it to an address that basically just comes up as a local Quest Diagnostics. Like these panels are not going to be good enough. The panels that actually catch these things are very expensive, right? And so when we hear athletes basically say they want better testing, we just remind them, listen, that means that the invasiveness of what it is, if it's going to be blood versus urine, could go up. It may mean
Yeah.
that the off-season testing is now specified, where if you're coming to a specific show, then you're going to submit to some level of drug testing that's more stringent. And so if the question from everybody then becomes, okay, what can you realistically test for? Whatever the cutting edge of science allows us to do is what we're signing up for. So as we move forward with whether it be the DFBA or you as athletes move forward, I'm just going to speak for all the federations when I say, guys, listen, there is a limit to this testing. And if you showed up 10 years clean, no one would be able to just look at you and have that be enough of a litmus test to be able to say this person used before. So that's the reason why a lot of federations and why we as a lot of athletes try to harp on off-season testing and why it's going to be very easy, right? If your federation is doing their job, if your federation signs up with us, that basically what they're saying is we're testing all of these winners before they ever get a shot at a title of your prestige. They're going to get tested again when they come to us.
Mhm.
When we do that, is one of those things that we're going to keep close to the chest. Do you get tested as soon as you show up for registration? Do you get tested right after you win the title? Are you expected to supply another sample the day after? Right. So when we say these things as athletes that we want better testing, I think a lot of people would do very well about educating themselves about what the tests are capable of, what a test of that standard in terms of time frame to actually get it tested is, and how much that test would cost. And a lot of the smell tests from the other federations probably wouldn't pass if you're basically paying $15 for a test and it's going to come back before the end of the show.
Mhm.
Use that at your discretion in terms of your own common knowledge base. But these are incredibly specific tests. You can catch people. But after 5 to 7 years, just like Dr. Johnson said, look, we can only do so much. And my argument has always been the burden of proof on being a solid athlete and living by the bylaws that you're signing when you compete at these things. Um, we're out here to say that we don't dislike anybody that uses performance enhancing drugs. This is just not your stage. And our vow is that as these drug testing standards continue to get better, we're going to catch you. So it's not worth it. So yes, 5 to 7 years is usually even the industry standard because it just comes to a point where the long-term metabolites, even at that time, if you're competing at that level, it's nearly impossible to catch them after that.
Yeah, yeah. I just picture James in the back being like,
Yeah, he swigs it.
dude's clean.
Nah, he's good. It's
Yeah,
good.
he's
Hey,
good. Put him
we
out.
said innovative strategies, right?
Yeah.
Just like these obnoxious like goggles on, and you're like,
Under a microscope, yeah.
yeah, I'm just not buying it. This Dan Cole fella. I don't know.
Yeah. No, and to build on that too, like as an athlete, you have the right to know like what tests your federation is doing. I would encourage all athletes to ask because everyone likes to throw out like, oh, we're WADA, we're WADA, we're WADA. Read into that a little bit. Are they sending their lab results to a WADA accredited lab, or are they just testing for some of the things that WADA tests for at an independent lab? If they're doing a WADA accredited test, is it the off-season panel or is it the in-season panel? Because there's a vast difference in what an off-season panel tests for versus an in-season panel, and there's a massive financial difference there too. So for federations that are doing off-season testing as their frontline testing, I get it from the financial side. It's $50 versus like $250. But then to go and say that we have the most stringent testing, we're WADA accredited, we're blah, 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 and you're doing an off-season $50 test that tests for 3 or 4 things, and that's it.
Liar.
A little smoke and mirrors. Well, I mean, you joke and you say liar, but there's some very prestigious federations that are doing that exact same thing. So, and I'll leave it at that.
And actually, the one last thing I want to say to athletes out there too is educate yourself on what they're testing for, right? Performance enhancing drugs is a cool flag that everybody waves where they're like, this is what we're looking for, performance enhancing drugs. The main problem is that the general public doesn't understand the general metabolite difference time frame in the body between a SARM and a testosterone derivative. They don't know when the federation is looking for test to estrogen ratios. They don't know what the difference is in terms of even the applicability on an athlete of pro hormones versus SARMs, right? When you look at how effective it would be to take a prescription strength Lasix diuretic right before the stage to get that really dry look, you know, testing positive for that isn't like I've been taking anabolics for 5 years, but you cheated, right? You cheated to the finish line. Um, those are things that matter. So when you also ask your federation what they're doing, you should ask them what panels they're running. I know for a fact that there are some federations, and I've actually come in contact with some powerlifting federations that consider themselves all natural, that they've basically said, like, we're looking for the hard stuff. We're looking for things that, they're flying in from Mexico that's going to help them with an anabolic response, that, Superdrol, Anadrol, Winstrol. We're looking for testosterone. We're looking for estrogen blockers, Arimidex, right? But realistically, you could go into a lot of supplement shops, pick up Rad 140, pick up YK11, finish off your prep, and you'll be fine. And I've talked to those federation heads, and they're like, yeah, it's too expensive to test for, anabolics that are lab derived via SARM versus via anabolics like we've had since the 50s, and they're not testing for it. So realistically, sure, is it going to give you the results that you would have if you went to a TRT clinic? No, probably not. But it would be enough to push you from third to first and take that title away from somebody else. So ask them what panels they're running. Ask them specifically, are you testing for the full WADA IOC panel of pro hormones, SARMs, masking agents, anabolic agents, estrogen blockers? Those are the things that matter. These are the things you want to know. And as much as it might go a little bit over your head, at least it'll give you a tidbit of information to go back, look up, and really feel comfortable telling people what you're testing for and how you know the other athletes that you're competing against are clean. That's what I would want as an athlete. That's why I married the federations that I did. And we're trying to make that an industry standard where you don't have to ask that question because it's on our website and you can just click it and take a look at who we tested, what they tested positive for. But also, even if we didn't catch somebody, here's the panel we ran and this is what it said.
Yep. Very cool.
Sure.
Very
And then
cool.
I have a
I got a dip,
question.
boys. I got a dip. Dad duty calls. I just want to say, shout out to you guys for leading this. I think this is awesome. I think this is the first time I've ever talked to you guys extensively about it, besides just like obviously James and I in conversation. As an athlete, this sounds amazing. I like where this is headed. I like you guys clearly have a very clear vision, which is exactly what this sport seems to lack, which is kind of crazy. But I'm very excited for what's to come. So obviously keep me in the loop and signed, sealed, delivered. I'm a big fan.
There we go.
And I'll
That's
Okay,
always
It's our
continue
helpful.
the
first.
question.
It's
Dan,
going to be our
finish this
first Star
strong.
Wars.
See you, boys.
Yeah.
So jumping off of well, talking about drug testing. So um, my understanding is that to a certain, so I guess my first question would be is what are the standards that you have in place for a member organization to in terms of drug testing? I've understood some of it from your prior podcast, but I think it's important to deliver that message, what that standard is here. And then also, it sounds like on top of that, you intend to do your own DFBA supplemental testing on top of what the organizations are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the reason for the dichotomy there is simply the financial burden. Like our goal has always been to make it as affordable as possible for the federations. That's why we're not charging a sanction fee. That's why yes, would I love to say like every federation has to do this, 5-step list for every single one of their athletes so that we know everybody, is completely covered? Yes. But realistically, some of these federations just can't do that. It's too expensive. So our restrictions or our expectations for them is to have some sort of pre-screening for athletes, leaving that ex, you know, specifically vague because some places do polygraph, some places don't do polygraph, but there are options, some options that I'm just now learning about. I've learned of 2 different technologies in the past couple of weeks that other federations are doing instead of the polygraph that are equally viable. So some sort of pre-screening for their athletes, and then urine analysis testing of winners, cash prize winners, pro card winners, and an expectation for off-season testing as well. And then once they reach our year-end stage, that's where we get to say like, hey, we're going to dump money into this thing and we're going to make sure we catch every single person because we don't want somebody that's taking something walking away with our prize money.
So as an athlete, if you're, say, a member of an organization, say the NBA, does joining the NBA mean that you can be tested by the DFBA by default then, or how does that work? Because, they're a member of a subsidiary, right? Um,
I'm sure that's a more legal question that I would have to bounce off someone with a little more knowledge. My initial kind of like gut instinct would just be to say, like, we just have to trust that those federations are doing the testing we're asking them to do until they reach our big stage. Once they've,
sure.
been accepted onto our stage, signed the application, there's going to be some, a clause in there, just like any one of these registrations are. Like if you go sign up for the PNBA, OCB, any one of these federations, they say like, I agree to be off-season tested. When they get accepted to our stage, that's going to be written in there as well. Like, so as soon as they've applied, now they're open to our pool of testing should we deem that that's necessary.
And I would argue too that, you think about what we're asking the federations to do from our end, from a table perspective. Um, it would be very simple to say to them, listen, for you to be in compliance with our ethics and function bylaws that you're basically saying you're signing up with us, we expect you to run, 10% of your competitor pool that shows up at our previous year or that you're planning on sending to us must have at least one off-season test in the last, 20 months or something like that. Um, it will grow from there, but the burden of the people putting forth their team to the actual tournament itself, the burden of proof is kind of on them until it's viable for it to be on us. If what you're saying is I'm bringing you the best of my natural athletes, then the onus is also on you to prove that they're natural, right? So I would argue that the off-season testing bit is more of a vestige of what we expect of our partner federations than it is for us to just walk into people's houses, find a broom closet, and start, collecting urine and blood.
Yeah, and that was just kind of my thought was just, can you, once somebody signs up with the NBA, can you guys just go and test somebody that you think is going to compete at your year-end event? Um, or could they say, no, I'm a member of the NBA, not
Right.
DFBA, right? So, um,
But yeah,
yeah,
like
you
Brandon said,
obviously,
like if those federations want to put their best foot forward, right? So they don't want to select a champion and then have that champion pop because that's going to look really bad on that federation, and that's going to hurt their membership base as well. So it's on them to kind of prove that those athletes are the best of the best.
sure, sure. And then jumping off a completely separate topic is, obviously unity has been difficult to achieve within natural bodybuilding. There's a lot of conflicting opinions, clashing personalities, I'll say. Um, you know, uh, James, you and I have, become exposed to a lot of that, being, a little bit more involved in the last few years of stuff that's like, holy crap, this goes deep. But what are the challenges that you guys have encountered in that regard? Do you see that moving in what I'll say, a better direction? And why do you think you guys can be the ones to unify? Obviously, you've gotten some organizations and such on board, but I know that not everyone is gonna, comply or not comply, but agree and want to join. So, yeah, what are you guys' thoughts surrounding that?
I think it's twofold, and then I'll Brand. I know Brandon has lots to say on this too, so this one could take quite some time. Um,
It's okay.
First off, the board of directors itself is a buffer for some of those personal conflicts because it's
Sure.
no longer this person and this person have to agree. It's this person and the collective have to agree, right? So you could have members on the board that do not want somebody involved, if the majority says that that person is a viable option, that's the way it goes. And that's democracy. And that's what the sport has been lacking, right? So I'm not naive enough to think that like every person's going to sign up for this. Some of these conflicts just go run too deep, at least in the first couple of years. Once that collective has grown, there might be, some incentive there. Um, for the federations that do not sign up, my hope would be that our movement is positive pressure. Think of it as constructive criticism, right? If we can make positive change and the athletes like what we're doing and the athletes are supporting what we're doing, that puts positive pressure on the federations that are not involved to at least make parallel changes with us.
I'll try to keep it, short and sweet because our main thing is this, right? Everything that we've been talking about, whether it be on this podcast or other podcasts, has always fallen toward the message of this being a collective, a democratic process, a amount of athletes that are coming together to speak as one voice, right? We would hope and we would love for every federation head to put their pride aside, give us a call and say, we knew that there was industry change coming. This sounds great. I want to sign
Kumbaya.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not naive, right? We understand that the reason why that hasn't happened is because a lot of the old heads in these federations built their business and built their message and built their athletic pool on a specific way of doing things. And whether or not that way is still working, they refuse to see, right? But our argument has always been the same. If you went to your athlete pool and the majority of them would go, no, this is a better way of doing it, or this is a great message, I would like to be involved in this. When we get on these podcasts, we're talking to the athletes. We're talking to you guys that are listening to this at the gym, getting ready for a show. We're talking to people who are in the middle of their workout, trying to find some motivation for a bigger show and to push a bigger message, right? The reason they have what they have in their federations is because of you guys. The reason this sport exists and the reason it pushes forward is because athletes want a shot. People want a better opportunity. People want better representation. They want a better voice. They want a better message, a bigger platform. And they want something specific out of the level of competition that they're competing in and the promise between the people who've said they're going to take care of them with their federation and then the execution of it all. So our message to everybody is yes, it has been a problem in the past to get federations to see outside of their own rose-colored glasses with the the blinders on, moving in one direction, which is a direction they've moved in the past, and that's how they made their money. But understand that they have that money because of us as athletes. And if that athlete collective that is just that federation decides, well, I wanted something different, and I'm just going to go do this instead because this is just a little bit of a better message. I like the way they do XYZ. You either pivot or you get left behind, right? So unfortunately, there are going to be people that are early to the game and late to the game. And our message to all of them is, you're welcome. We want you, right? I want all of the best on our stages, and we're not trying to take anything away from you. And so while time heals all wounds, it also shows all directions of every industry, right? On a long enough timeline, you'll see where the ebbs and flows of these athletes are going to go. And we would just ask all of these federation heads to keep an open mind about us not trying to take money out of your pocket, but to give you an access to athlete pools that you wouldn't have had otherwise, access to bigger stages that you otherwise would have had to have planned yourself, which is thousands of dollars and thousands of hours of manpower and planning, and listen to your athletes and say they want to represent you. They want to step on these other stages with your coat of arms attached to them so that other people will know that your federation is the tits, right? If that's what we're saying, that we're inviting you because we believe you produce some of the best athletes and we want you to be a part of your message, then it's a point of pride. What we're doing is thumping your chest and going, you think you're the best. Well, prove it. And we would say to everybody listening to this as athletes, ask your federation to prove it. We know it's going to be an uphill battle for some of these federations to want to sign up, and we're okay with that. We put the yoke of responsibility on ourselves so that the burden of proof would be on us to provide a better, a different, and a brighter platform, period.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great way to close things, and I think it's important to note on my end, I think the that you guys intend to allow these organizations to maintain their autonomy. They're a member as of the collective, right? It's not like they're going to be superseded by the DFBA. They'll just be a member of the DFBA. But so just to close this one out, where can people find you, get more information about you guys? Where do you recommend they reach out if they want to get involved or have questions either as maybe let's make this a two-part question as an organization or organization head, representative, etc., versus an athlete. Where would you direct them to contact you or just find more information about you guys?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
So
so right now the Instagram is probably the easiest way, and that will kind of like serve as a jumping off point for all of those questions, right? So DFBA_global on Instagram. On there, you'll find tons of information that we've posted, hopefully more as I get better at posting on there. And that's normally me that's responding. So if you have specific questions, I'll be the one probably responding to those until we hire more people. Um, and then linked on an Instagram is dfbaglobal.com, which is our website, which is kind of in its early phases. As we have more federations jump on board and as we have more shows announced as qualifiers, those will all be listed there so athletes can find where they can qualify, as well as our rules and regulations, guidelines, all those fun things. And then, yeah, I mean, there is an email as well if you wanted to, which you can find on the website, dfbaglobal@gmail.com. But normally just shoot us a message on Instagram or check out the website and you should find out most information or listen to all the podcasts we've been on.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I think it's really cool to see, what's been talked about um, a lot on our podcast, Natty News Daily podcast, Bodybuilding Down Under, all these podcasts about, trying to collectivize, um, to see the effort being done by some guys that I trust within the industry, and yeah, I love to see it. So I'm excited to see what you guys do and what comes of this. So year one.
Come watch us. Come watch us put our money where our mouth is, guys. Monster Mash this year, and ask us while you're there. Hey, what's the shows look like for next year? And we'd love to have you guys. And if what you're looking for is something different to do with your natural bodybuilding career and a message that you really can get behind, we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you want us to say. Let us be your mouthpiece, guys.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys jumping on and and talking about this and spreading the message. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please direct it to these guys' way and to their Instagram's way. And yeah, leave a comment below of what you think and what you think about the direction of natural bodybuilding. And yeah, thanks for joining, and we'll catch you in the next one.